Hello, friends. Adrian Gonzalez here with the Life Twin Sprite deck that you guys wanted to see. I'm gonna just give a brief summary of like how my testing came to this deck and like what exactly happened immediately after the ban list dropped. So we started out testing a few different decks versus the Kashtira deck and slowly found more and more weaknesses to build upon in whatever deck I would ultimately choose to play. It was pretty clear after one of our testing sessions that Cash didn't have a good time dealing with mid-range decks because of all the hand traps that it played and just like one card engine that could push through hand traps as well. From my prior knowledge of Sprite and now with Elf Band, I knew the weaknesses of the deck were more susceptible to being exposed, but the Sprite cards, in my opinion, were still by far the strongest engine in the game, and also exposed one of Kashtira's biggest weaknesses, which is making Zeus without activating a monster effect. So I knew I wanted to play some Sprite deck, and intuition told me that Pure and Runic were just not going to cut it because of Cash applying too much offensive pressure versus those decks, and also those decks not having great ways to continuously out big bodies. My initial thought was to figure out the Tri-Brigade Sprite deck following what the OCG was doing. That deck was okay and like would win some games, but as my testing partner Faisal got better with the Cash deck, I found myself losing more and more games, and like just the inconsistencies of that deck with being hindered by the Sprite cards past turn one, then your tri-engine not being big enough to like support a grind game was also like a huge fault. So after giving up on that deck, I chose to retest a deck that I had a lot of prior experience with and got a top with, to being the Life Twin Sprite deck. The only glaring issue the deck had before is that it didn't do too much unless you open a Life Twin starter or even an extender, in which case you just use Gigantic to get the second one out the deck. So that being said, I knew that the deck would become more of a Life Twin deck by playing more of the Life Twin starter cards, using the Sprite engine as support rather than its main core engine as I did in Niagara. So now the deck had everything. It played Sprite cards, which I wanted. It was strong and synergistic in the main deck. Mained many non-engine cards and could expose Cash's biggest weakness. Lila plus Sprite Blue, aka Blue Blue, is an FCK. And well, now let's get right into the deck. So for the Life Twins, it was D6, so 3 of the blue, 2 of the red one, and then 1 of the red extender, the 3 Tenki, and 3 of the secret password. So for this, I decided to believe Jesse on the 5 normal summon rule and cut a pink, allowing me to confidently cut the blue extender, which saved 2 main deck spots, and also just like the blue extender was very, very bad, and like it would only come up if the pink normal summon was your normal summon, and then this got hand trapped, and then on top of that you didn't have any Sprite engine to extend past that. I wanted to replace the 2 cards I cut with more consistency cards, since I did technically cut a consistency card by cutting the pink. But once another card came into like the discussion that increased the power of the Sprite half of the deck, I just cut that consistency card as well to help the deck out in that way. The Life Twins, unlike Nimble Beaver, actually applied pressure as normal summons and helped end on disruption and follow up if it was hand trapped with the help of the Sprite cards. Then getting into the Sprite cards, this, and this. So all of these are like really good. I think all of these are standard for the most part as like for a Sprite engine. Then you easily get away with like playing one of these because this actually just allows you to kill your opponent, and this was what the pink normal summon was cut for, and it just allowed you to go for game with just these cards if you didn't draw any of these. So this card came into discussion because the deck had like some issues versus Despia, but it was mainly just like going second after you stop their turn. You can't reliably end on disruptions to stop them for another turn, which would like allow you to kill them like across 2 turns. So like I needed something that would like allow me to kill them that turn, and using the life twins to like deal with one of the big monsters and then just attack over everything for game. Yeah. Gamma Burst was like pretty crazy all weekend. It just really was insane. Flasto told me to main deck this card because at first I was just siding it when I was going second. But like this card just like was really good, and like it really helped cover the weakness of losing Elf, which like affected your grind game. So like if you have this to just kill your opponent, like you don't worry about the grind game. For the part card that I chose to play was Desires. So there was like a brief argument of whether or not this would be Prosperity or not. Just because like this card's like overall like very solid, but Prosperity is like also pretty solid, even though it has like some inconsistencies with your life twin part of the deck. But Prosperity also really shined when you went second, just digging for side deck cards that much easier. But ultimately I chose to go with this because it just helped with going first that much more. And then I also find myself siding out at least down to like 1 Desires going second into cash since I side thrusting. Just because like if they do get to the Iobalos, you don't want to like have this be the way you start to play, because then you just lose your entire deck. Either that or you just give them more materials to a Rice Heart, which like if they have like a chainable something to just activate to get banished to get like a 3rd material after you use the pot, then that can mess up your Zeus line to clear their board. For the rest of the deck is 13 non-engine to make a perfect 40. 3 Ash, 2 Veiler, 2 Nib, 3 Imperm, and 3 Book of Eclipse. So Ash is just very good. It's just, especially in like an open format like this. I was honestly very surprised that a lot of the top players did choose to play Cash. I'm not sure if they will continue to play Cash because I think that deck is very bad. But I did expect it to be the most played deck this weekend. But again, I don't think that trend will continue at all. Veiler is like not necessarily the best, but it flows with your deck very well, simply because it's not once per turn and you can draw it during your opponent's turn. So like several times throughout the day, I just draw like extra hand traps during my opponent's turn, just like make my board that much more resilient. Or like drawing Book of Eclipse, which is also just like one of the best going second cards right now to like crack boards on the follow-up. Then this card is like the only one that doesn't do it, but this is like still just by far one of the best ones to play. Just avoids thrust and tactics, since like people know you're on a hand trap deck. If they did decide to play either of those cards, they would side those cards in just to like help them push through the hand traps. Like to go along with like the rest of the deck is just, you just really want your deck to be like as little as clunky as possible, so that in the games where you do get tactics looked at the hand, you just have like way too much going on for them to make it worthwhile. That's it for the main deck. For the side deck, I played the third Veiler and one Mourner. So this is like a little random, but I was to 14 cards because I moved Gamma Burst from the side to the main deck. So I knew that this slot would probably be just a hand trap, so I just chose to make it Mourner, just like another Veiler type card. Again, for the same reason, it's just like another card you could draw into when you go first. Especially since, at least my theory when it comes to playing mid-range decks like these is to like build your side to avoid the blowout cards like Evenly and Storm. And so, well, like these cards for going first, I take out these 6, which are very weak to the blowout cards, whereas these 6 are not weak to any of those cards. Because this is chainable, worst case you just summon Jet from grave and you add a starter for the follow-up, and then these just stay in your hand, avoiding that. Double Cross, just like, there was like some talk about meaning it, because it is just like very strong if you do go first. Like, it is by far the best like grab off of Jet, just because it's very hard to like play through this. And they also, like, your opponent special summoning Fenrir applies like a little bit too much pressure for your deck. Like, you have to trade 2-for-1 interruption wise against a Fenrir, which isn't that great, but it's very manageable. And then with this card, it just means that you don't really have to care about the Fenrir. So it's like, if they ever go battle phase, you could just like take it, start a battle, and then you still have all your disruptions. And then D-Barrier is just like, at least right now, the best going first card in my opinion. Especially with Gamma Burst being in the deck. It just made it so that like skipping your opponent's turn was just very lethal. And you just like easily kill them, because like your deck just plays through hand traps, stops yourself from getting nib. You grab Gamma Burst and you just OTK. Next, it's the Thrusting Toolbox, which are these cards. So like these are like the obvious ones, and like this card was a Pancratops for like a little bit, but the Pancratops was like mainly for Sprite mirrors, because I thought like at least like there would be a few more like other good Sprite players like playing the deck, but like I just never played versus one. But I still figured that like a Dark Riddler would be much better than a Pancratops in that slot. That, with on top of being searchable by Thrust, like all of these cards were like very, very good. Just like being able to turn like these 1-0s into 3-0s whenever you need them is like very strong. Then Searching Duster is probably like the strongest part about this card, because the Labyrinth deck triggers like monster effects sometimes when you like go to the battle phase, and then you just like thrusting for Duster, clear the background, then you're just free to play from there. And they're just so far behind. Then for the last card is just Street Cosmic. With the rise, we expected like a small rise in runic decks. Like this card is just like the best going into that. And then it's just like generic back removal. For the extra, I have 3 of the pink link, 2 of the blue link. again, it's like mainly a life twin deck, so you play like the standard ratios of these cards, and then this card is like, I really like this card. Like, it was really good for me this weekend, and then I just think it's just like a very strong card to just play in the deck. I think it's working. Just like being able to like make it with like these, you get the draw, you get the pop, and then you deal a lot of damage. So in scenarios where you do have to attack over big monsters, and like let's say you like desires banish your gamma burst, like this is the card that lets you go for the OTK. Then if it doesn't do that, it still just attacks over a big body, attacks itself out for these, you get the remaining effects, and then this gets banished, sending this to the grave to re-trigger this during your opponent's turn. And then this is just like non-target spot removal. So that like comes up whenever like you get rivalried in like weird spots. Or just to like out like unknown back row, like if your opponent hasn't done anything. This dark, again, like the theory was to like play versus Sprite mirrors, but like they just didn't exist this weekend. The only time I summoned this card, and the only reason I summoned this card, was because it pointed down and I double crossed my opponent's nib token, because this is the only card in the deck that isn't these that points down. So that was pretty funny, but this could have been like anything, but I don't know if I would actually change it, because there is like some scenarios where if you don't open one of your life twin starters, but you open like a Sprite starter, the spell, you can like make this crash, and then that'll get you access to your life twin engine. That didn't come up, but it has come up a few times in the past, and yeah, I think just like that alone like makes it worth playing over other cards. For the XYZs, I played Sky Cavalry as like the main form to get into Zeus. The main reason for this was, so yeah, to get into Zeus, but it also returned Mirror Jades back into the extra deck, which is something like that's otherwise really hard to deal with in this deck, since Zeusing a Mirror Jade just clears your whole board. Then yeah, that can just be really tough to like recover from. Played Gin Buster as extra negate to make. This card was really good. Like the burn effect unironically came up in time when me and my opponent, I think, were both at 8k, and with like a minute left on the clock, I summoned this with like a full like board, right? And then so I put him on, okay, his draw for turn has to be a Spreader Trap, and I have a Karen negate, and he has 2 other cards in his hand which are monster effects, which I just burned him. And since he was playing runic cards, he couldn't enter battle phase to attack, so it's like he just couldn't activate anything, so he was forced to pass back, and then I just win by attacking. Anakin Cat, it's like a little weird, since like you've seen I don't play like targets for the card, like anything specific to summon. It's just there to like tutor out the life twins, or to tutor out Blue and Jet, to like make the Mannequin Cat gigantic Zeus line, which is just like a very clean line to make whenever you just want to have engine and you want to wipe a board. It was also there to like punish shifters that were sided in versus me, and against like Kashira deck, since I'd summon 2 monsters. Like if I normal summon a life twin starter, right, they don't want those cards getting into the grave, so they will shifter me like after I normal summon. And then I'll overlay for Mannequin Cat in defense mode, summon their shifter, and now they control monster. Then I'll summon blue, jet, add double cross. Since most of the time it'd be post-sided games. So the double cross will deal with their normal summon. The Mannequin Cat dealt with all their special summons from hand. And then I'd have like a carrot or a red off the Gigantic as a negate. So that would just like easily beat the shifter. The only time I got shifter was versus, what's that deck called? The Exo Sister deck, which, like, okay, so it wasn't like that crazy, but it like still stopped Martha from being activated. Which is that deck's like main form to like push. Then we have double Gigantic. So this is like your main starter play and your main follow-up play. To use your Sprite engine to get back into your Life Twin engine. And also to use your starter play to use your Life Twin engine to get into your Sprite engine. Yeah, this card is just crazy. Especially like the way I sequence the hands that I would draw, it just made it like very hard for my opponent to like ever hand trap nib me like successfully. And like even one of my hands pushed through an Ash, and then I summoned like carrot red and like just full comboed, and then he showed me later that he also had imperm nib, which there just wasn't a good time after that to like for him to imperm nib me. So that was just crazy. That was like I pushed through an Ash and then turned off imperm and nib. So like this deck is just like very insane. Because they could just do stuff like that. Then we have Down Nerd and Double Zeus. So people weren't going as heavy for the Diabolos lines. But this is like probably still just correct to like play Double Zeus just because of how strong it is into the Kashtira end board. Then Downerd, again, by like making Zeus without using an effect, the Downerd allows you to play through like any effect negation as well, just going double Zeus. So like that's just like very strong. Like this card was just crazy. It's probably the best extra deck monster in the whole game right now. And yeah, that's the deck. Just shout out to my brother and Faisal, who were my teammates. They took turns taking L's so that I could carry them. My overall record by the end of the week was 11-2. And the only times I lost were by just like completely getting sacked. So my first loss was getting impermed. I still ended on 3 interruptions. Then my opponent goes Lava Golem, taking me down to 1 interruption. And then he goes Feather Duster, taking me down to 0. And then he special summons Unicorn and kills me. I was like, neat. And then the second loss was on stream against Charlie in top 4, where he opened a Luber, so basically Branded Fusion, Book of Eclipse, and Crossout for my Ash. Well, Ash that didn't exist but could have existed, so like it just didn't matter. Yeah, so that was just like really crazy hands, or like the only thing I lost to all weekend. So like I think that just says a lot about the deck and like how strong it is moving forward. And, shout out to all the fans, of course, and all the friends that make it worth the while to travel as much as I do, regardless of the outcome. And shout out to Frank and Vidmar for sponsoring me, you know, Team TGS. And most importantly, a shout out to Joe White. He lent me his Life Twin Core, and then we represented his life insurance selling all weekend. And yeah. That's it? Alright. If you guys have any more questions, just leave it down in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Bye.